The golden lights of the Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom sparkled like diamonds against the crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Tonight was special. The annual Heroes Foundation Charity Gala was in full swing, and the who's who of Hollywood had gathered for one important cause: helping military veterans get back on their feet after serving their country. Sylvester Stallone stood near the bar, looking surprisingly relaxed for someone who usually commanded attention wherever he went. At 78, the legendary actor still carried himself with the confidence that made Rocky Balboa a household name. He was dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled, and that famous smile lighting up his face as he chatted with a group of retired Army sergeants. "You know, when I was filming Rocky, I never imagined it would mean so much to real fighters," Stallone said, his voice carrying that distinctive rasp that millions of fans recognized instantly. "The letters I get from veterans, from people who found hope in that story, that's what makes it all worth it." The veterans nodded respectfully, clearly honored to be speaking with someone they'd grown up watching on screen. One of them, a graying man with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Stallone, my son was deployed in Afghanistan. He watched Rocky every night before missions. Said it reminded him that underdogs can win if they don't give up." Stallone's expression softened. These were the moments that mattered most to him now. Not the box office numbers or the magazine covers, but knowing his work had touched real lives in meaningful ways. Across the room, servers moved gracefully between tables laden with expensive wine and gourmet appetizers. The guest list read like a directory of entertainment royalty. A-list actors mingled with successful business owners, professional athletes, and decorated military officers. Everyone was here for the same reason: to raise money for veterans who needed medical care, job training, and housing assistance. But not everyone in the room shared the same spirit of respect and giving. Near the entrance, a young man in his mid-20s surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. Tyler the Thunder Johnson had arrived fashionably late, making sure his entrance would be noticed. At 6'2", with a muscular build that spoke of countless hours in the gym, he moved with the swagger of someone who'd never tasted defeat. Tyler was the current rising star of mixed martial arts. In just 3 years as a professional fighter, he'd racked up an impressive 15-0 record, with 12 of those wins coming by knockout. His last fight had been featured on the main card of a major pay-per-view event, and his social media following had exploded to over 2 million across all platforms. Success, however, had gone to his head. Tyler's team, his manager, publicist, and a small crew of yes-men followed him like a pack of wolves. They fed his ego constantly, reminding him how special he was, how he was destined for greatness, how he was better than fighters who came before him. "Look at this place," Tyler muttered to his manager, a thin man named Rick who was always looking for the next big publicity opportunity. "All these old-timers living off past glory. This is our time now." Rick nodded eagerly. "Absolutely, champ. You're the future. These guys had their day, but that day is over." Tyler's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Stallone. A slow smile spread across his face, not the kind that came from joy, but the kind that came from seeing an opportunity. "There's my ticket to the next level," Tyler said, nodding toward the legendary actor. Rick's eyes lit up. "Stallone, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time someone called out all this fake movie fighting nonsense. Someone who knows what real combat looks like." Tyler flexed his hands, already imagining the viral videos and news coverage that would follow. The young fighter had been planning something like this for weeks. His last fight had gotten decent attention, but he wanted more. He wanted to be on every sports show, every entertainment news program, every podcast that mattered, and he knew that controversy sold better than anything else. Tyler had grown up watching Stallone's movies like everyone else. But where others saw inspiration, Tyler saw opportunity. He'd convinced himself that actors like Stallone were somehow taking credit away from real fighters. In his mind, people should be talking about actual athletes like him, not some Hollywood star who'd never stepped into a real ring. What Tyler didn't understand was the difference between being a fighter and being a warrior. He had the physical skills, the training, the wins on his record, But he lacked the one thing that separated true champions from mere competitors: respect. As the evening progressed, Tyler watched and waited. He studied Stallone's movements, listened to his conversations, and looked for the perfect moment to make his move. The cameras were here. Entertainment reporters from major networks were covering the charity event. Social media influencers were streaming live from the red carpet. The setup was perfect. Tyler pulled out his phone and started recording a quick video for his Instagram story. "What's up, Thunder Nation? I'm here at this fancy Hollywood party, and guess who I'm about to have a little chat with?" He turned the camera towards Stallone, who was still engaged in conversation with the veterans. Time to show these movie stars what a real fighter looks like. The people around Tyler, his team, some other young fighters who'd started following him around, all encouraged him. They laughed at his jokes, agreed with his plans, and made him feel like he was about to do something legendary. None of them stopped to think about what they were really encouraging. As Tyler made his way across the ballroom, weaving between tables and conversations, he didn't notice the genuine warmth in Stallone's interactions with the veterans. He didn't see the respect the actor showed to everyone he met. He didn't observe how Stallone listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made each person feel valued. All Tyler saw was a target. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. In a room full of people who had gathered to honor service and sacrifice, one young man's ego was about to clash with decades of earned respect and dignity. What Tyler didn't know was that this night would teach him lessons he never expected to learn, and those lessons would come from a source he never saw coming. Tyler took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders as he approached Stallone's group. His heart was pounding, but not from nerves, from excitement. This was his moment. This was how legends were made. The entertainment reporters had noticed him moving across the room. A few camera phones were already pointing in his direction. Perfect. Everything was going according to plan. Stallone was in the middle of sharing a story about his training for Rocky when Tyler stepped into the circle. The conversation naturally paused as people noticed the newcomer. "Excuse me?" Tyler said, his voice carrying across the small group. "Mr. Stallone, right?" Stallone turned with a warm smile, extending his hand. "That's right. And you are?" "Tyler Johnson. You probably know me as the Thunder." Tyler shook the offered hand, but his grip was unnecessarily firm, almost challenging. "I'm a professional MMA fighter, undefeated." "Congratulations," Stallone said genuinely. "That's quite an achievement. Are you here supporting the veterans tonight?" Tyler's smile had an edge to it that made some of the veterans shift uncomfortably. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else. About fighting." The group sensed a change in the atmosphere. What had started as a pleasant conversation was beginning to feel tense. One of the older veterans, a man who'd served 3 tours overseas, quietly stepped back. "I've been watching your movies my whole life," Tyler continued, his voice getting louder. "Rocky, Rambo, all that stuff. And I gotta ask, do you actually think any of that fighting looks real?" Stallone's expression remained calm, but his eyes showed a flicker of concern. "Well, Tyler, movies are entertainment. We try to tell good stories that inspire people. But that's the problem," Tyler said, pulling out his phone and starting to record. His manager, Rick, had moved closer, also filming from a different angle. "People think movie fighting is real fighting. They think actors like you know something about combat." The veterans around them began to look uncomfortable. This wasn't the time or place for this kind of conversation. They'd come to honor service members and enjoy an evening of respectful fellowship. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at," Stallone said, his voice still patient but with a slight edge creeping in. Tyler stepped closer, his confidence growing as he noticed more people starting to pay attention. A small crowd was beginning to form around them. "What I'm getting at is simple. You've made millions of dollars pretending to be a fighter. But you've never actually been in a real fight, have you?" The room around them started to quiet down. Conversations at nearby tables stopped as people turned to see what was happening. The entertainment reporters smelled drama and moved closer with their cameras. "Tyler," Stallone said carefully, "I'm an actor. I've never claimed to be anything else. The characters I play are fictional. But people look up to you like you're some kind of tough guy. Tyler pressed on, his voice rising. Kids think Rocky Balboa was real. Veterans think Rambo was based on actual military experience. Don't you think that's kind of fake? One of the veterans, the graying man who'd been talking about his son earlier, stepped forward. Son, maybe we should take this conversation somewhere else. Tyler barely glanced at him. No, this is exactly where this conversation needs to happen, in front of everyone. He gestured to the growing crowd and the cameras. People need to hear the truth. Stallone's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. What truth is that, Tyler? The truth that movie stars aren't real fighters. The truth that someone like me, someone who's actually dedicated their life to combat, who's actually been in the ring against real opponents, represents what fighting really looks like. Tyler began shadowboxing, throwing quick combinations in the air near Stallone. His movements were sharp and precise, clearly showing his athletic ability. This is real technique. This is what actual fighting looks like, not that choreographed movie stuff. The crowd was getting larger now. People were pulling out their phones, some posting live to social media. Tyler noticed the attention and fed off it, his movements becoming more dramatic. I train 8 hours a day, Tyler continued, still throwing punches in the air. I've studied every martial art you can name. I've taken hits from some of the strongest men on the planet. When I step into that octagon, lives are on the line. Careers are on the line. That's real pressure. Stallone watched quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. The veterans around him looked increasingly uncomfortable with Tyler's display. So here's what I'm thinking, Tyler said, finally stopping his shadowboxing and pointing directly at Stallone. Why don't you show everyone what movie fighting looks like? Come on, throw a punch. Show us that famous Rocky technique. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. This had gone way beyond awkward and was heading toward genuinely disrespectful. Tyler, I don't think that's appropriate, Stallone said firmly. Why not? Scared that everyone will see it's all fake? Tyler laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Look, I'm not trying to hurt you or anything. You're what, almost 80? I just want people to see the difference between real fighting and Hollywood fighting. A few people in the crowd began to back away, clearly uncomfortable with how aggressive Tyler was becoming. But others stayed, their phones still recording, fascinated by the drama unfolding. Tyler's manager, Rick, whispered something in his ear, probably encouraging him to keep going for the cameras. Tyler nodded and turned back to Stallone with renewed confidence. Tell you what, Tyler said, spreading his arms wide. I'll make this easy for you. Just show me one move from Rocky. Just one. Prove that all those fight scenes taught you something about real combat. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Everyone could feel how wrong this was, but nobody seemed to know how to stop it. Stallone looked around at the faces watching him. Some sympathetic, some curious, some just waiting to see what would happen next. This is supposed to be an evening about helping veterans, Stallone said quietly. And it still can be, Tyler replied. But it can also be about truth, about showing people the difference between fantasy and reality. Tyler began recording himself again, speaking directly to his phone camera. What's up, Thunder Nation? I'm here with Rocky himself, and I'm trying to get him to show us some of that movie magic. But he seems a little hesitant. He turned the camera toward Stallone, who looked directly into the lens with dignity, despite the uncomfortable situation. Maybe, Tyler continued, the truth is that when you take away the cameras and the stunt coordinators and the special effects, there's not much real fighting knowledge left. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tyler had pushed far beyond what anyone considered appropriate behavior, especially at a charity event honoring veterans. But he seemed oblivious to the discomfort he was causing, too caught up in his own performance to notice how badly he was coming across. What Tyler didn't realize was that his moment of seeming triumph was about to become something very different. Someone was about to walk into that ballroom who would change everything about this confrontation. But for now, Tyler felt like he was winning. The cameras were rolling, the crowd was watching, and he had successfully put one of Hollywood's biggest legends in an uncomfortable position. He had no idea how quickly that feeling was about to change. Tyler felt the energy in the room shift, and he loved every second of it. More people were gathering around them now, phones out, recording everything. He could practically hear the notifications pinging as people shared the videos across social media. This was exactly what he'd wanted. Maximum attention, maximum drama. "Come on, Mr. Stallone," Tyler said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Don't tell me the great Rocky Balboa is backing down from a little demonstration." Stallone remained calm, but anyone who knew him could see the frustration building behind his eyes. This wasn't just disrespectful, it was embarrassing for everyone involved. The veterans who'd been enjoying a peaceful conversation now found themselves in the middle of an uncomfortable spectacle. Tyler's confidence grew with each passing moment. He started walking in a small circle around Stallone, like a predator sizing up its prey. "You know what I think? I think deep down, No, I'm right. You know that all those fight scenes were just make-believe, and now you're face-to-face with someone who does this for real." The crowd was getting bigger. Word was spreading through the ballroom that something was happening near the bar. People were abandoning their conversations and dinner tables to see what the commotion was about. Some looked concerned, others seemed entertained by the drama. Rick, Tyler's manager, was practically bouncing with excitement as he filmed from multiple angles. He whispered to one of the other team members, "This is gold, pure gold. Tyler's going to be on every news show tomorrow." Tyler heard the whisper and smiled wider. He turned to address the crowd directly, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing something historic here tonight. For the first time, someone is asking Hollywood to be honest about what real fighting looks like." A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd come here for. They'd paid good money to support veterans, not to watch some young fighter make a scene. But Tyler was just getting started. "Mr. Stallone, let me ask you something," Tyler said, pulling out his phone again and switching to live stream mode. "Have you ever been punched in the face, like really punched? Not by a stunt coordinator with fake blood packs, but by someone who actually wanted to hurt you?" Stallone's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he kept them there. "Tyler, this isn't the place for this conversation." "Why? Because there are cameras here? Because people might finally see the truth?" Tyler laughed, but it sounded harsh and mean. "Or is it because you don't have a script to tell you what to say?" The live stream was gaining viewers rapidly. Comments were flooding in, some supporting Tyler, others calling him out for being disrespectful. But Tyler only paid attention to the ones cheering him on. "Look at this, everyone," Tyler said, speaking directly to his phone camera while gesturing toward Stallone. "This is what happens when you challenge Hollywood mythology. They can't handle reality." One of the veterans, the older man who'd tried to intervene earlier, stepped forward again. His voice was steady but firm. "Son, you need to stop this right now. This isn't what tonight is about." Tyler barely glanced at him. "With all due respect, sir, this is exactly what tonight should be about. Truth, honesty, showing people the difference between real warriors and pretend ones." The veteran's eyes flashed with anger. "Pretend ones? Boy, do you have any idea what that man has done for veterans over the years? How much money he's raised, how many lives he's touched?" "I'm sure he's written some nice checks," Tyler said dismissively, "but that doesn't make him a fighter. That doesn't give him the right to represent what combat looks like to millions of people." The crowd was getting restless. Some people were starting to leave, clearly uncomfortable with Tyler's behavior. Others were pulling out their phones to call security. But Tyler didn't notice any of this. He was too focused on his performance. "You want to know what real training looks like?" Tyler asked, addressing both Stallone and the crowd. He started doing burpees right there on the ballroom floor, his movements sharp and athletic. 5 a.m. every morning, sparring with killers, getting submitted until you learn to submit others. People stepped back to give him space, but not because they were impressed, because they were embarrassed for him. Tyler popped up from his burpees and immediately went into a series of high kicks, his leg cutting through the air inches from Stallone's face. "This is real technique. This is what happens when you dedicate your life to actual combat, not pretending for cameras." A waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses had to quickly step aside to avoid being hit. The glasses rattled, dangerously as Tyler's kicks whistled past. "Tyler, please," Stallone said, his patience finally starting to wear thin. "You're going to hurt someone." "The only person who's going to get hurt here is someone's reputation," Tyler shot back. "When people see this video, they're going to realize they've been fooled for decades." He turned back to his phone, which was still streaming live. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. Over 50,000 people were now watching the confrontation unfold in real time. "What's up, everyone watching live?" Tyler said, slightly out of breath from his impromptu workout. "I'm here at this fancy Hollywood party, and I just asked Rocky Balboa to show me some real fighting techniques. Guess what? He can't do it." The comments on the live stream were getting more heated. People were arguing with each other about whether Tyler was brave for calling out Hollywood or just being a jerk. But the controversy was exactly what Tyler wanted. "Mr. Stallone," Tyler said, turning back to the actor, "I'm going to give you one more chance to prove that all those years of playing tough guys taught you something. Just throw one punch. Show me that famous left hook that knocked out Apollo Creed." Stallone looked around at the crowd, at the cameras, at the veterans who were clearly upset by what was happening. "Tyler, Apollo Creed was a fictional character. You understand that, right? I understand that millions of people think Rocky was real because you made it look so convincing," Tyler replied. "So if you're such a good actor, prove it. Act like a fighter for real." The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Even Tyler's own team was starting to look uncomfortable with how far this had gone. But Tyler himself seemed oblivious to the mood shift. He began shadowboxing again, this time more aggressively, his punches coming close enough to Stallone that the actor had to lean back slightly to avoid contact. "This is what real power looks like," Tyler said between combinations. "This is what real speed looks like. This is what happens when you've actually been hit back." Security personnel had finally started moving toward the commotion, but they were being careful not to escalate the situation further. The last thing anyone wanted was for this to turn into an actual physical confrontation. Tyler noticed the security guards approaching and smiled. "Oh, now they want to shut me down. Now that someone's finally telling the truth, they want to silence the real fighter." He raised his voice so everyone in the ballroom could hear him. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is how Hollywood deals with reality. They try to make it go away." What Tyler didn't realize was that reality was about to walk through the ballroom doors in a way he never expected. Someone was approaching who would change everything about this situation. Someone whose reputation for real combat was absolutely unquestionable. But for now, Tyler felt like he was on top of the world. He had Stallone cornered, the cameras rolling, and thousands of people watching online. In his mind, this was his moment of triumph. He had no idea that his biggest challenge was just seconds away from walking into the room. The ballroom doors opened quietly, and a figure stepped inside that made several people near the entrance do a double-take. Chuck Norris moved through the doorway with the kind of presence that didn't need announcements or fanfare. At 84 years old, he still carried himself with the quiet confidence that had made him a legend. He was dressed in a simple black suit, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. But somehow people noticed him immediately. There was something about the way he walked, the way he held his shoulders, the calm look in his eyes that commanded respect without demanding it. Chuck had been running late from another charity event across town. His driver had apologized for the traffic, but Chuck had just smiled and said they'd get there when they got there. He wasn't the type to make a big fuss about anything. As he moved deeper into the ballroom, Chuck noticed the crowd gathered near the bar. He could hear raised voices, see people holding up phones, feel the tension in the air. His instincts, sharpened by decades of martial arts training and years in law enforcement, immediately told him something was wrong. Tyler was still in the middle of his performance, completely unaware that the dynamic in the room was about to change dramatically. He was shadowboxing more aggressively now, his movements sharp and fast as he continued his one-sided confrontation with Stallone. "See, this is the problem with Hollywood," Tyler was saying to his phone camera, which was still streaming live to thousands of viewers. "They create these fake tough guys and people actually believe they're real fighters." Chuck stopped about 20 feet away from the commotion and simply observed. He didn't push through the crowd or announce his presence. He just watched and listened, quickly understanding what was happening. One of the event organizers, a woman who had been trying to figure out how to handle the situation without creating an even bigger scene, noticed Chuck and hurried over to him. "Mr. Norris, thank goodness you're here," she whispered. "This young fighter has been harassing Mr. Stallone for the past 10 minutes. We're not sure how to handle it without making things worse." Chuck nodded but didn't take his eyes off Tyler. "What's his name?" "Tyler Johnson. He calls himself the Thunder. He's been trying to get Mr. Stallone to fight him or something. It's completely inappropriate." Chuck watched as Tyler continued his display, noting the young man's technique, his conditioning, his obvious skill as a fighter. But he also noticed something else: the complete lack of respect, the hunger for attention, the way Tyler seemed to feed off the discomfort he was causing others. "I can see Mr. Stallone is handling this with grace," Chuck said quietly. "He's trying to, but this Tyler person just won't stop. He's live streaming the whole thing, making it into some kind of spectacle." Chuck nodded again. He'd seen this type before, young fighters who were technically skilled, but had never learned the deeper lessons that martial arts were supposed to teach. They focused on the physical aspects but missed the spiritual and mental discipline that separated true martial artists from mere fighters. Tyler was now doing jumping jacks, his voice getting louder as he addressed both Stallone and his online audience. "This is what real conditioning looks like, people. This is what it takes to be an actual fighter, not just play one in movies." Several people in the crowd were shaking their heads, clearly embarrassed by Tyler's behavior. The veterans looked especially uncomfortable. They'd come to enjoy an evening of respect and fellowship, not to watch someone disrespect one of their supporters. Chuck began moving slowly through the crowd. He didn't push or shove. People just seemed to naturally step aside for him. There was something about his presence that made people want to give him space, not out of fear, but out of instinctive respect. Tyler finished his jumping jacks and turned back to Stallone, who was still standing calmly despite everything that had happened. "Okay, Mr. Rocky," Tyler said with a smirk. "Last chance. Show everyone what movie fighting looks like, or admit that it's all just pretend." That's when Chuck's voice cut through, the noise like a blade through silk. "Excuse me." The words were spoken quietly, but somehow everyone heard them. The entire crowd turned to look at the source of the voice, and Tyler's head snapped around to see who had interrupted his moment. Chuck Norris stood there, hands at his sides, looking directly at Tyler with calm, steady eyes. He wasn't angry or aggressive. He just looked like someone who had something to say. Tyler's first reaction was confusion. He recognized the face, of course. Everyone knew Chuck Norris. But he wasn't sure why this old man was interrupting his confrontation. "With Stallone, can I help you?" Tyler asked, his tone showing annoyance at the interruption. Chuck stepped forward, not threatening, just closing the distance between them to a more conversational level. "I think maybe I can help you." Tyler looked Chuck up and down, taking in his age, his calm demeanor, his simple suit. After a moment, Tyler's expression shifted to something approaching amusement. "Let me guess," Tyler said, turning to address his phone camera again. "Another movie star wants to defend Hollywood fantasy fighting?" Chuck didn't react to the provocation. Instead, he spoke directly to Tyler, his voice steady and clear. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler Johnson. But you probably know me as the Thunder. I'm an undefeated MMA fighter." Tyler's chest puffed out slightly as he said it. "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I'm Chuck." Tyler almost laughed. "Yeah, I know who you are. Chuck Norris, right? Walker, Texas Ranger and all that. Another actor." The crowd around them had gone completely quiet. People were pulling out their phones, but not in the chaotic way they had been earlier. This felt different. This felt like something important was about to happen. Chuck nodded. "I did some acting, that's true. But before that, I spent a lot of years studying martial arts, learning from some very wise teachers." Tyler's smirk grew wider. "Okay, and? What does that have to do with what's happening here?" "Well," Chuck said, his voice still calm and conversational, "I noticed you challenging Mr. Stallone to demonstrate fighting techniques, and I heard you talking about what real martial arts look like." That's right, Tyler said, his confidence returning. I'm trying to show people the difference between real fighting and movie fighting. Chuck was quiet for a moment, as if considering his words carefully. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made everyone listen more closely. Tyler, can I ask you something? In all your training and all your fights, did anyone ever teach you about respect? The question hung in the air like smoke. Tyler's expression flickered slightly, but he quickly recovered. Respect is earned, Tyler said. In the cage, through blood and sweat and victory. Chuck shook his head slowly. No, son. Respect is given. First, everything else comes after. Tyler looked around at the crowd, at his phone which was still streaming, at the cameras that were now focused on this new development. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. Look, Mr. Norris, I respect what you did back in your day, but this is about now. This is about real fighters versus Hollywood pretenders. Chuck's eyes never left Tyler's face. And which one do you think you are? The question was simple, but something about the way Chuck asked it made Tyler pause. For the first time since this whole confrontation started, Tyler seemed unsure of his answer. The room was completely silent now, waiting to see what would happen next. Chuck Norris stood there patiently, not aggressive, not threatening, just a man who had asked a question and was waiting for an honest answer. Tyler felt the weight of that gaze, and for the first time all evening, he wasn't entirely sure what to say next.